It didn't happen the way I thought it would. There were no flashing lights, no dramatic music, no slow-motion collapse like in the movies. It was quiet, hauntingly quiet. And the scariest part? I wasn't afraid. Not at first. I had been sick for months, years, really. But this particular day felt different. Something deep inside me, beyond flesh and bone, knew. It's strange how the soul can whisper louder than any words. I remember lying there in the hospital bed, watching the beige ceiling tiles blur into one another. Machines beeped rhythmically around me, but they felt like background noise to a much deeper stillness that was settling in. My daughter had just left the room, kissed my forehead, told me she'd be back after work. I smiled at her the way parents do when they're trying to protect their children from the truth. She didn't know that goodbye was going to be the last. As the door clicked shut behind her, the room grew colder. Not physically, I wasn't shivering, but emotionally. The kind of cold you feel in the soul when something sacred is about to happen. I stared up at the ceiling and realized I was ready. I didn't have a grand final thought. No flashbacks, no last regrets screaming for attention. Just this overwhelming sense of surrender. Peaceful, heavy, undeniable surrender. Like the tide had finally come in, and all I could do was let it carry me. Then it happened. A strange silence fell over everything. The kind that doesn't just mute the world around you, it pulls you inward. I couldn't hear the machines anymore. I couldn't feel the bed beneath me. Even the pain, which had been my constant companion for so long, seemed to dissolve. Everything stopped. I remember blinking once, slowly, and when I opened my eyes again, something was different. I was still in the room, but not really. I could see my body lying there, lifeless, still hooked up to wires and monitors, but I wasn't in it. I wasn't even touching the floor. I was floating, hovering, observing, and in that moment, an ancient truth washed over me. I was not my body. I never had been. I watched a nurse rush in, calling for help. More people flooded the room, shouting medical terms I didn't understand. One of them began chest compressions. Another checked my eyes. But I just stood there, if you can even call it standing, with a sense of calm that was so profound I almost wanted to laugh. They were panicking, but I was free. There was no pain, no fear, just this overwhelming, all-consuming sense of release. Like every worry, every doubt, every burden I had ever carried had simply evaporated. And then the room began to fade, slowly at first. The walls seemed to stretch, bend, dissolve into something less physical. The fluorescent lights above me dimmed into a kind of golden glow, not from the fixtures, but from somewhere else, somewhere beyond. That's when I noticed the silence had changed. It wasn't empty anymore. It was full of meaning, full of presence, like the space itself was alive. I could feel something or someone waiting for me in that space. Not judging, not rushing, just waiting, like a parent watching a child take their first steps. And I realized in that moment that I had stepped out of time, out of pain, out of the human story, and into something much, much greater. Something sacred was about to begin. But before I continue, I just want to say this. If you've lost someone, or if you've ever wondered what happens in those final moments, know this. It's not the end. It's the beginning of something more beautiful than you can imagine. If this story resonates with your heart, if you've ever felt the presence of someone you've lost or longed for peace in your grief, I invite you to subscribe and stay with me through this journey. What I saw on the other side changed everything, and I believe it can bring comfort and hope to your soul too. I didn't fall. I didn't rise. I simply was, suspended, still, and strangely aware. It was as if time had stretched itself thin, no longer linear, no longer marching forward. Everything was happening all at once, and yet nothing was rushing. From above I looked at myself, my body lying so still. The skin seemed pale, waxy, like a mask that had lost its actor. There was no fear in seeing myself like that, no panic, no sorrow, just a quiet understanding. That is no longer me. The doctors moved quickly. Someone placed paddles on my chest. I could see the tension in their faces, the determination in their hands, but I wasn't interested in the drama of resuscitation. My attention was drawn elsewhere. Something invisible was calling me, not with words, but with a pull so gentle yet so certain, I couldn't resist. I turned away from my body. Or maybe I didn't turn at all. Maybe I just shifted my awareness. There was no gravity here, no sense of direction in the way we understand it on Earth. I moved by intention, not by muscle. Wherever I focused, I went. And that's when I felt it, a presence. It wasn't like seeing a person walk into a room. It was more like recognizing someone who had always been there, hidden behind the veil of the physical world. The moment I became aware of it, I was filled with the deepest peace I had ever known. It surrounded me like warm water, weightless, safe, infinite. And then, the thoughts began. Not mine, theirs. But they didn't speak with words. They spoke with knowing. And the first thing I heard was this: you are safe. You are known. You are loved. The moment those thoughts entered me, I felt something inside crack open. All the walls I had built over a lifetime, the shame, the regret, the fear of not being enough, melted away like ice under sunlight. I felt seen in a way I never had on earth. Not just the good parts of me, but all of it. The anger, the failures, the private pain no one ever knew about. And yet, there was no judgment. Only love. It was the kind of love that made me weep without tears. A love so vast, so unconditional that I wondered how I had ever lived without remembering it. And then I began to move again. Through what? I don't know. There were no walls, no floors, but I was being drawn, gently, effortlessly, through a kind of space that shimmered with energy. I could feel other presences around me now, not physical bodies but souls, familiar, ancient, radiant. Somehow, I recognized them, not by face, but by feeling, like remembering old friends from a life you lived long ago. I passed by what I can only describe as veils of light, each one richer, more alive, more beautiful than the last. Colors I had never seen before danced through the space, not just to be looked at, but felt. Everything here had emotion, depth, meaning. And then came the realization: I wasn't dreaming. I wasn't hallucinating. I was home. That word filled me with a kind of aching joy. I hadn't known I was homesick until I returned. Earth had always felt slightly off, as if I were wearing clothes that didn't quite fit. But here, everything aligned. I belonged. There was no fear of death, because there was no death. There was only a transition, a gentle stepping through from one reality into another, like walking from one room to the next, and realizing you had been in a fog your entire life. This was clarity. This was truth. And as I surrendered fully to that awareness, something even more astonishing began to happen. The truth, the deeper truth, was about to reveal itself. Because beyond the beauty, beyond the peace, beyond the reunion with that infinite presence, was a purpose. A secret so ancient and so intimate that it would change everything I believed about life itself, and I was about to hear it. I didn't see the light at first, I felt it. It began as a subtle warmth, like the sun on your skin after a long winter. But this warmth wasn't physical. It radiated into the core of my being, melting away every trace of pain, fear, and doubt. Then it appeared. It didn't rush toward me. It didn't blind me. It simply was, majestic, alive, and utterly overwhelming in its beauty. A light more radiant than the sun, but it didn't burn. It didn't even shine in the way earthly light does. It emanated from everywhere and everything. It was everything. The moment I became aware of it, I knew two things at once. First, this light was conscious. It wasn't a force. It wasn't an object. It was a presence, a divine, knowing, boundless intelligence. Second, this light knew me, completely. Not just the things I had done, but the thoughts I never said out loud, the dreams I had buried, the moments I had judged myself unworthy. It saw it all, and loved me anyway. No, because of it. I didn't feel exposed. I didn't feel ashamed. I felt known. Finally, fully known. Being in its presence was like standing in front of the purest mirror imaginable, not one that reflects your appearance, but one that reflects your soul. And what I saw was both humbling and awe-inspiring. I remember thinking, this light, it knows everything. And then the knowing came. Not in words, not in images, but in a download of pure truth that flooded me with understanding. This light wasn't just aware of me, it was aware of everyone. Every soul, every heartache, every triumph, every stumble. It didn't measure worth the way we do on earth. There were no labels here, no rich or poor, no educated or uneducated, no success or failure. Only essence, only soul. And in this place, every soul was precious. I didn't ask questions, I didn't need to. Every question I'd ever had about life, about death, about love, pain, war, purpose, was answered all at once. Not with facts, but with understanding. I didn't just know the answers, I felt them. Time didn't exist here, not in the way we experience it. I saw my entire life stretched out before me like a tapestry, every thread connected to another in ways I'd never realized. I understood how even my smallest actions had impacted others, rippling out far beyond what I had imagined. But more than that, I saw why I had lived. Not in a vague philosophical sense, but in crystal clarity. Every moment mattered. Every tear I'd shed had softened my soul. Every act of kindness, no matter how small, had lit a candle in someone else's darkness. Every failure had been a teacher, and woven through it all was something greater, something holy, love. The light pulsed with it, breathed it, communicated through it. Not sentimental love, not romantic love, but the source of all love. The kind that has no beginning and no end. The kind that doesn't need to be earned or deserved. It just is. And I understood then that this light was not just surrounding me. It was the origin of everything. It was the creator. Not a figure sitting on a throne. Not a man with a beard. Not even a being in the way we think of beings, but a presence so infinitely loving and intelligent that everything in me bowed before it. And yet, it didn't demand worship. It invited intimacy. It drew me in, closer and closer, until I felt like I was dissolving into it, becoming part of it, as if every cell of my soul was returning to where it had always belonged. And in that moment, merging with that light, I knew something was coming, something even more intimate, because this light had something to show me, a truth not just about my life, but about every life. The next part of the journey was not about floating or flying. It wasn't about visions or symbols. It was about being shown who I really was and why I had come to Earth in the first place. And not just me, all of us. We all have a reason for being here. And I was about to learn the secret. The light began to shift, not in brightness or warmth, but in purpose. I could feel it guiding me, gently wrapping around my awareness and drawing me towards something important. It wasn't a place, not really, but more like a state of being. Suddenly I found myself standing, if you could call it that, before what looked like a vast living archive, and in the center of it all, there was a book. But not just any book. This book was alive. It pulsed with energy. Its cover shimmered with a color I still don't have words for, something between gold, sapphire, and memory. It vibrated with truth, with my truth. And somehow I knew this was the story of my life. I didn't open it. It opened to me. Pages turned by themselves, not like paper caught in wind, but as if guided by a consciousness that knew exactly what needed to be seen. And I watched, not with my eyes but with my being, as moments from my life came alive in perfect clarity. It wasn't just a visual replay. I relived each moment, felt it, from both sides. There I was as a child, laughing with my brother in the backyard. I felt my own joy and his. Every time I showed kindness, the ripple it caused spread outward, touching lives I never even knew I impacted. A simple smile to a stranger, a word of comfort to a friend. I saw how those small acts lit up hearts like stars. And then the harder pages came, moments I had forgotten or tried to, times I spoke in anger, moments I turned away from someone who needed me, decisions I made from fear or selfishness. But even then, I wasn't shamed. I wasn't punished. I wasn't condemned. Instead, I was invited to understand. I felt the pain I had caused, not as punishment, but as empathy. I felt what the other person had felt, their confusion, their hurt, their longing to be seen. And I wept, not out of guilt, but from a place deeper than that, a longing to do better, to love better. The light remained with me through it all, holding me, embracing me. Not once did it turn away, not once did it accuse. It simply let me see. And in that seeing I realized something profound. Every moment of my life had meaning, not because it was perfect, but because it was real. Every mistake was a lesson. Every sorrow was a doorway. Every encounter was sacred. There were no coincidences, only connections. I saw people who had entered my life for reasons I never fully understood until now. Some to teach me love, others to teach me strength, forgiveness, or even boundaries. I saw how souls crossed paths in perfect timing, like intricate choreography performed on the stage of the physical world, and I realized something that shook me. Before I came to Earth, I had chosen much of this. Not the suffering itself, but the opportunities to grow through it. Somehow in that space I remembered, my soul had longed to experience Earth, not for the comfort but for the transformation, for the way pain refines love, for the way loss deepens presence, for the way darkness makes the light matter. The book showed me moments I thought were meaningless, forgotten or wasted. But in this realm, nothing was wasted, not a single breath. Every second was accounted for, not with cold precision, but with sacred care. Even the broken parts, especially the broken parts, because in those places light had seeped in, and through those cracks I had grown. As the last pages turned, I felt an overwhelming sense of completion, not in the sense that my life had been perfect, but that it had been true, honest, messy, beautiful. And then, as the book began to close, I sensed a deeper truth rising from the stillness around me. This wasn't just about my story. There was a greater pattern, a divine architecture, connecting all our lives like a great tapestry, each thread necessary to the whole. And I was about to be shown the design, not from a book this time, but from a place beyond language, where purpose itself lives. The book of my life faded into the light like a dream dissolving at dawn, and in its place there was only stillness, not emptiness, presence, a stillness so deep it felt alive, the kind that doesn't just hold silence but speaks through it. I stood, if one can stand in a place without form, completely open, completely bare, and completely held. And then the love came, not like a wave crashing in, not like a sudden burst of emotion. It came gradually, softly, like the first warmth of spring seeping through frozen soil. It began at the edges of my awareness and crept inward until there was no part of me untouched. It wrapped around every memory, every wound, every question I had ever buried, and it whispered, not in words, but in essence, "You are mine. You have always been mine." I thought I had known love before. I thought I had felt it in my daughter's arms, in the laughter of friends, in the quiet moments of prayer. But this was something entirely different. This was unconditional love in its purest, most unfiltered form. There were no requirements here, no ifs, no whens. No, you're worthy only if. There was no scale weighing my goodness against my flaws, no record of wrongs, no withheld affection. There was only one truth, ringing through my soul like a bell. You are loved simply because you exist. It's hard to explain what that kind of love does to you. It doesn't just comfort, it transforms, it untangles the knots inside you that you didn't even know were there, the places where you thought you weren't enough. The moments when you felt forgotten, invisible, unworthy. This love reached into those places and simply was, not to fix, not to erase, but to be with. And as it filled me, I remembered what it felt like to belong, not to a group or a family or a belief, but to the source, to something so vast and intimate, so powerful and gentle, it defied every category I'd ever known. This was the origin of my soul and the destination. Time didn't pass in this place. There was no before or after, just love, eternal, infinite, completely aware of every part of me and choosing, again and again, to stay. At one point, I felt as though I was moving, though there were no steps. It was more like I was being drawn deeper into this love, or maybe I was expanding into it. Either way, I knew something was changing. I began to see, feel others, souls, beings, not with names or faces, but with signatures, like songs you remember from childhood. Some felt familiar, like I had known them for eons. Others were new but equally radiant. There was no competition here, no hierarchy, just unity. And the love I felt wasn't mine alone. It flowed between all of us, through all of us, like an unbreakable current of light and grace. Every soul I encountered carried its own story, its own journey, and yet we were all made of the same thing, love. In that space, I came to understand something that changed me forever. Love is not an emotion. It is not an action. It is not something you give or receive. Love is the substance of the soul. It is what we are made of. It is the thread that connects us to each other, to creation, to the divine. And every time we act in love, no matter how small, we echo the truth of our origin. The journey through unconditional love didn't end. It became me, and in that state of oneness, of deep and sacred union with all that is, I felt the next phase arriving, a space unlike any I had ever known, not of light, but of design, not of feeling, but of knowing. It was time to understand why we come to Earth in the first place, why we leave this perfect love to enter a world of pain and beauty, of chaos and wonder. I was being invited to step into the place where purpose is born, and there I would be shown everything. The light began to change again, not fading but shifting, from pure love into pure knowing. The warmth remained, the embrace never left, but now it came with a sense of movement, of intention. I was being drawn towards something greater than comfort, something sacred, sacred in the deepest sense of the word. I had no body, yet I moved, or perhaps I was carried, effortlessly, silently, through a realm that felt older than time itself. The atmosphere grew denser with meaning. Every particle seemed to shimmer with intelligence. I didn't walk, but I approached. I didn't knock, but something opened. And then I was inside. Not a room, not a building, but a space I can only describe as the Hall of Purpose. It didn't resemble anything physical. It wasn't made of stone or glass. Yet it felt structured, intentional, like a cathedral made of memory, spirit, and light. I didn't see walls, but there were boundaries, defined not by materials, but by presence. And the presence in that space was indescribable, ancient, infinite, tender. Just being there felt like being held inside the mind of something eternal. It was a place of deep remembering, a sacred gathering ground for souls before their descent into the physical world. And I wasn't alone. I sensed them before I saw them. Other souls. Some still, some radiant with anticipation, some preparing to return to Earth, others simply watching. Their form was fluid, not bound by gender or age, but by essence. Each one unique, but all connected by one unshakable truth. They came here to choose. In this space there was no confusion, no fear, only clarity. And then I understood. Before I was born, I had stood here, right here, in this very space, and I had chosen my life. Not every detail, not the exact way things would unfold, but the currents, the lessons, the opportunities for growth. I had selected the people who would walk with me, the ones who would challenge me, teach me, love me, break me open, and heal me. And they had chosen me too. It wasn't random. None of it was. Even the pain, especially the pain. From this higher vantage point, I could see the beauty in things I had once hated, the patterns I had missed while living within the limitations of a body and a brain. Here, in this sacred hall, it all made sense. The timing, the delays, the losses, the longings. They were threads in a larger tapestry I couldn't see from Earth. But here, I could see everything. I watched as souls reviewed possible lives, like echoes of stories yet to be written. I saw some choose lives of ease, others of struggle, some brief, others long. And I understood. It wasn't about punishment or reward. It was about experience, expansion, becoming. Because Earth is not a test, it is a classroom. A place where the soul can feel contrast so vividly that it begins to remember what it truly is. And that remembering is everything. I felt myself remembering too. Not just this current life, but others. Echoes of lifetimes where I had been rich, poor, lost, found, male, female, silent, outspoken, cruel, kind. Each life had added something to my soul, a new color, a deeper compassion, a sharper awareness, and through all of them, one desire had remained: to love better, to live more consciously, to reflect the light I came from. And then I was shown something that made my soul tremble. I saw a group of souls surrounding one another in a circle of light. They were preparing to incarnate together. I could feel the depth of their connection. Some would be born as parents and children, some as lovers, some as enemies. And yet, there was no malice, only love. Even those who would bring each other pain had chosen to do so out of agreement, because the pain would awaken something, teach something, open something. It was an act of service, not cruelty. That revelation undid me. To think that even the wounds we carry were chosen with love, it was almost too much to comprehend. But I knew it was true, because in that hall, only truth existed. No illusion, no ego, just the soul in its purest state saying, "This is what I need to grow. This is how I will remember who I am." And I realized then, with more clarity than ever before, we are not victims of fate. We are participants in a divine plan, not a rigid script, but a sacred dance. And the next step of the dance was near. The light had shown me the place of choice. Now it was time to hear the truth, the one truth that every soul holds, whether they remember it or not. The secret, the reason we come, the purpose behind every life. There was no grand announcement, no trumpet, no thunder, no voice booming from the sky, only stillness, only presence. And then the truth arrived, not in words, not even in thoughts. It arrived the way light enters a darkened room, quietly, fully, without effort. It filled me from within, like remembering something I had always known but had somehow forgotten. And this was the truth. We are here to love, not just romantically, not just as parents or friends or partners, but to be love, to learn it, to give it, to receive it, to express it in every form, in every breath, in every circumstance. That is the purpose of every human life. We come to earth not to accumulate, not to dominate, not to prove ourselves, but to expand the presence of love in a world that has forgotten it. Every soul, every person, every story, no matter how tragic, no matter how broken, no matter how lost, it all revolves around one central truth. We are here to remember love, and to help others remember it too. It felt so simple, yet so complete. The secret wasn't hidden in sacred texts or locked away in cosmic codes. It had been with us all along, in the way a mother touches her child's hair, in the way a stranger offers kindness with no expectation, in the way someone forgives even when the world says they shouldn't. Love isn't the reward, it's the path. It's the soil in which the soul roots itself, the water that nourishes growth, the fire that burns away illusion, the air that keeps us connected to each other and to the source. I saw it then playing out across time and space, lives interwoven by acts of love, some small, some enormous. I saw how a single act of compassion could ripple across generations, how forgiveness could end cycles of pain that had lasted lifetimes, how loving even one soul could alter the course of the whole. And I saw how fear was never the opposite of love. It was the absence of remembrance. When we forget who we are, we fear. When we fear, we build walls. When we build walls, we suffer. But love tears the walls down, not with violence, not with force, but with presence, with truth, with light. And that is why we come, to remember who we are, to remember where we come from, to remember what we carry inside us, and then to live that remembrance, not in perfection, but in intention. Even in our mistakes, even in our flaws, the soul can love. The soul longs to love. It's the reason we wake up each morning. It's the reason we feel pain. It's a compass pointing us back to what matters. It's the reason we grieve, because love doesn't die and its absence aches. It's the reason we keep going, even when the path is dark, because some part of us knows deep down that the light is real and we were made of it. In the Hall of Purpose, I didn't just hear this truth, I became it. It settled into every part of me, fusing with my soul, erasing every lingering doubt. The questions that had haunted me in life. Why am I here? Does my life matter? Is there meaning in all this pain? They were answered without fanfare. Yes, you are here to love. Yes, your life matters because your presence carries light into places where it's been forgotten. Yes, even your pain has purpose because it softens you, opens you, prepares you to love deeper than you could have imagined. I wept, not from sorrow, but from release. It was all so clear, so beautiful, so full. And just as I began to settle into that knowing, to breathe in that purpose like sacred air, something unexpected stirred within me. A calling, a pull, not to stay, but to return, because the secret wasn't mine to keep. It was a seed meant to be planted in the world, through me. I didn't want to leave, not because I was afraid of going back. No, fear didn't exist here. It couldn't survive in the presence of that light, but because everything in me was finally at peace, finally whole. I had never felt more alive than in that place beyond life. And yet, something began to stir, not outside of me, but within. A pull, a call, a question, so gentle and yet so absolute, rose up from deep within the light and reached into my essence. Will you go back? At first I hesitated, not because I didn't love the life I had lived, but because the contrast was so stark. How could I leave this infinite peace for a world of struggle, uncertainty, and forgetfulness? But then I was shown something. Not a vision, not a command, just a knowing, a direct infusion of understanding, like someone gently placing a truth into my heart and letting it bloom. I saw my daughter. I saw her sitting alone, head in her hands, the hospital room now empty. Her grief hung around her like a fog. I felt her heart, felt the weight of her unanswered questions. I saw the way she would carry that moment, the moment she walked out of the room and never saw me open my eyes again, and I felt her soul calling to mine, not with words, not even with conscious intention, but with love. That's when I realized something that still shakes me to this day. Our love calls each other home. It bridges realms. It breaks through veils. It echoes across dimensions. And her love was calling me back. But it wasn't just her. I saw moments, future ones, begin to form like stars coming into view through a telescope. Moments I hadn't yet lived. People I hadn't yet touched. Words I hadn't yet spoken. I saw small, seemingly insignificant acts. An unexpected kindness to a stranger. A conversation that would ripple out. A moment of presence that would change the course of someone else's day, maybe even their life. And I understood. I hadn't finished planting what I came to sow. It wasn't about grand achievements or changing the world in some dramatic way. It was about showing up, with love, with light, with remembrance, living the secret I had been given. And so the question remained, quiet but unwavering, will you go back? There was no pressure, no obligation. The choice was mine. Entirely. I could have stayed. I could have remained in the embrace of that light, in the unity of souls, in the eternal unfolding of love. But deep in my soul, I knew the time wasn't done. Not yet. There were people waiting. There were words that needed to be spoken. There was love that needed to be expressed, even in the face of fear, even in the fog of forgetfulness. I didn't return for myself. I returned because I had been given something precious, a remembering. And that remembering wasn't just for me, it was meant to be shared. And so, with one final breath of that divine presence, I said yes, not with words, but with surrender. I chose to return. And just like that, I was falling. Not like falling through air, but through layers of reality, through veils of light and sound, through a narrowing tunnel of awareness. The peace began to fade, replaced by sensation, by weight, by gravity. I could feel my body again, the tightness in my chest, the pressure in my skull, the beep of machines, the sterile scent of antiseptic, the heavy hum of fluorescent lights above me. I gasped. It was like coming up from deep water, harsh, cold, jarring. But I was back, and I remembered. Not everything, not all at once. The fullness of the experience faded quickly, like a dream slipping through my fingers. But the truth remained. The knowing. I had chosen this, and I had chosen love. Waking up wasn't like opening my eyes after a long nap. It was like being pulled through layers of thick fog, each one heavier than the last. My body felt foreign, like a garment I hadn't worn in years, tight, clumsy, filled with aches and limits I hadn't missed. The machines were still there, the sterile lights, the faint rhythmic beep of life being monitored, and then came the voices. Muted, concerned, urgent. I couldn't make out the words at first, but I could feel the energy, surprise, disbelief, awe. Someone said my name. I blinked, and the room stopped. There was movement, nurses, a doctor, someone rushing out to call someone else, but I wasn't focused on them. I wasn't focused on anything out there, because everything in me had changed. I didn't just feel different. I was different. As if the soul that had once filled this body had expanded, deepened, softened, and then returned with a new frequency. My heartbeat sounded louder. My breath felt more precious. Every sense, every thought, every sensation came wrapped in something sacred. Even the pain, especially the pain. I wasn't afraid of it anymore. I understood it now. Pain was the body's cry for attention, for presence. And I was present, fully, achingly, beautifully present. When my daughter came into the room, her eyes swollen with worry and hope, I smiled, not with effort, but with recognition. The bond between us was no longer just biological. It was eternal, I could feel the threads of lifetimes stretching between our souls, golden and unbreakable. She held my hand. I held her gaze. And though neither of us said a word in that first moment, everything was spoken. I stayed in the hospital for weeks. They ran tests. They asked questions. They tried to explain what had happened, or how I was still alive at all. They used words like miraculous and unexplainable, but I didn't need an explanation. I had been beyond the veil. I had seen what lies on the other side of the last breath, and I had returned not to convince, not to preach, not to argue, but to live differently. Everything became sacred. Washing my hands, feeling sunlight on my face, hearing someone laugh, watching a tear fall. The ordinary had become extraordinary. Every moment shimmered with divine fingerprints. I no longer chased certainty. I no longer feared endings. Instead, I began to ask deeper questions, not with anxiety, but with wonder. What would love do here? How can I show up with light in this moment? Where is grace trying to unfold? And people noticed. Friends, family, even strangers sensed it. This quiet shift in me. Some said I looked softer. Some said I seemed more still. Some said they felt calmer just by being near me. I didn't try to explain it all, I couldn't. But I knew they were feeling the residue of where I had been. So I began to share, carefully, humbly, piece by piece. Not the details at first, but the truth behind them. That we are not alone. That love is the essence of everything. That every life matters. That pain has purpose. That the ones we've lost are not truly gone. That we are so much more than we've been led to believe. Some people received it with open hearts. Others with quiet curiosity. A few with skepticism. And that was okay. I didn't return to convince. I returned to love and to remind, because that was the mission now. Not a grand calling, not a public crusade, just a simple, sacred remembering. To carry the truth of that light into everyday life, to be a mirror for others when they forget who they are, to walk through the world with open eyes, open hands, and an open heart. And every day, I wake up not wondering if I have a purpose, but how I will live it today. Every person I meet is an opportunity to love. Every challenge is a chance to remember. Every breath is a gift. I returned not just to live again, I returned to live awake. If you are hurting right now, if your heart feels too heavy to carry, if the loss seems unbearable, if you wake up with questions that burn in the silence, I want you to hear me. Not just with your ears, but with the part of you that still hopes. Even through the sorrow, you are not alone. I've walked through the veil. I've stood in the place where pain has no home. I've felt the love that waits for all of us, the kind that holds every shattered piece and calls it sacred. I've seen what lies beyond death, and it is not the end. It's a return, a remembering, a homecoming so profound that even your deepest grief is not without meaning. I know the ache of loss. I've felt the sting of watching someone you love slip from your arms, wondering if they knew how much they meant to you. I've known the silence that follows a final breath. I've seen the empty chairs, the unspoken words, the what-ifs, but I've also seen the truth. They are not gone. They are not lost. They are not suffering. They are more alive now than they ever were in this temporary world. And they are closer than you think. I felt it from the other side, the way our love calls out, like a signal across dimensions. I felt the pull of those still living, the echo of hearts still beating for someone who's passed. And I promise you this, they hear you. They know. They are with you in the quiet moments, in the songs that suddenly make you cry, in the dreams that feel too real to ignore, in the breeze that brushes your skin just when you're thinking of them. Love does not die. It cannot, because love is eternal. I saw it. I became it. And now, having returned to this world, I live with that knowing carved into my soul. So if you are grieving, if you feel like life has lost its light, if the days stretch long and empty, please hear me. You are not broken. You are not forgotten. You are in the middle of something sacred. Grief is not a mistake. It's not weakness. It's the evidence of how deeply you've loved and how deeply you were loved in return. It's the soul remembering what it means to be eternal, even while living inside something temporary. And while the pain may not go away quickly, I can promise you this. You are being held, not just by those around you, but by something greater. There is a light beneath your suffering, a truth beneath the questions, a presence that has never left your side. You came to this life for a reason. You are not here by accident. There is something in you, some flicker of love, some hidden strength, some soft brilliance that this world needs. Don't hide it. Don't give up on it. You carry within you a piece of the same light I stood before. You were made of it. You are it. And if you've lost someone, if you've cried yourself to sleep, if you've begged for a sign, let this be it. Let these words reach the part of you that still believes, however small. They are not gone. You will see them again. And until that moment comes, they walk beside you, in the invisible places, in the quiet encouragements, in the sudden sense that maybe, just maybe, everything is going to be okay. Because it will be. You were never meant to do this alone. You were never meant to carry all the weight. And you were never, not for 1 second, forgotten. The love you've known, the love you've given, the love you've lost, it's all still here. It never left. It never could. And one day when your time comes, not in fear, not in sorrow, but in peace, you will remember it all. You'll remember the light. You'll remember the truth. You'll remember home. Until then, keep going. Keep loving. And when it's hard to believe, let me believe for you. You are not alone. The story isn't over, and the love never ends. Discover how to unlock your prophetic destiny, activate spiritual gifts, and impact your sphere of influence with the power of the kingdom. Don't miss this transformative opportunity. Click the link in the video description to learn more.